Hey guys, I'm Papa Pete, and I'm back after a long hiatus with the next in my Atari 2600 reviews of games that I used to play when I was a kid. And today's game, yeah, you see it right here, Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. How could such an amazingly popular game be as controversial as this one here is? Anyway, stick around, you're about to find out.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't grown up by the age of 50, you don't have to.
As soon as I eat that power block, you guys are finished!
Drop Atari Pac-Man into your Atari video computer system and you're playing the hottest game since Space Invaders, Atari Pac-Man.
I got Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my... Hate to eat and run!
Pac-Man by Atari.
What we know today as Pac-Man started off as Puck-Man in Japan in early 1980. Well, Namco brought it over to the United States after it proved to be very popular over there, but one of the first things it had to do in October of that year was change the name from Puck-Man to Pac-Man. Obviously they could see what was going to happen to the arcade cabinets, a little bit of graffiti would have gone on there. Anyway, it almost became an instantaneous hit. It sold over 100,000 units and had over $1 billion worth of sales in quarters. Absolutely amazing. Wherever you turned back in 1980, you saw Pac-Man. It was in all the arcades. It was in corner stores, bowling alleys, malls, everywhere. There were toys. Toys started to come out. You used to see it on TV, and there was even a big hit single by Buckner and Garcia called Pac-Man Fever that made it all the way up to number 9 on the US and Canadian Billboard charts. Atari had the right to all Namco games in North America, so in May 1981, Atari went out and hired Todd Fry, assigned him the job of bringing Pac-Man to their home console, the Atari 2600. The goal was for him to have it out by Christmas 1981. Well, it didn't happen by Christmas that year, but he did manage to get it out and released in March 1982. So on March 16, 1982, the Atari 2600 released Todd Fry's version of Pac-Man to the masses for the Atari 2600. The anticipation for this game was incredible because literally millions of people loved playing this game in the arcades. And how well was Pac-Man received? Well, let me put it this way. It might have been a good idea if they had changed it back to its original name. Well, we all pretty much know how to play Pac-Man. But for any of us who don't, in essence, you control Pac-Man going throughout a maze, gobbling up dots, while you're being chased by 4 ghosts. The object of the game is to eat as many dots and score as many points as you can. Clear the maze of all the dots and go on to the next maze. Now there are also, to help you out, special power pellets in each of the corners of the maze. When you eat one of these pellets, for a real brief short time, you can then turn around and eat the ghosts. There's also a special item that appears now and again, and you can pick up that for extra points. Now the gameplay in the Atari 2600 version was exactly the same as this. Well, except for a few differences. Now the map in the Atari 2600 version was totally different than the one in the arcade. It wasn't portrait orientation anymore, it was landscape, and it was just little squares, very, very geometrically symmetrical, and it was really quite bland. They changed the dots. The dots were no longer, well, first of all, they weren't even called dots. They were called wafers because of the shape, which had to be done in the Atari 2600. The sound system was totally different. Very, very tinny, very grating. Again, limitations for the system? Yeah, ultimately it was, but remember, the hopes were very high at this time because the arcade system had such great sounds. The ghosts no longer were fluid on the screen. They had a real flashing effect on them because they had to use a little trick to make things come in and out in order to get all the moving parts on the screen for the 2600. The escape hatch was no longer on the sides, it was through the top and bottom, and you couldn't see your Pac-Man go out through. It just went up, disappeared and then come back up in the top, the bottom. And one last thing about the ghosts no longer had their individual traits. All the ghosts were the same in this game. So before, in the arcade version, you used to feel like you could act differently around the different ghosts because you knew what they were going to do, because they would just do different. You knew that the red ghost was going to chase you. You knew that the orange ghost, Clyde, was going to be very slow. You could get away from him. You could do different things. But in the Atari 2600 version, that AI wasn't there. All the ghosts just moved around and just didn't have the same feel. It just didn't feel the same as the arcade version. Let's start with the very first graphical difference of the game, and that's the ghosts themselves. Well, the Atari 2600 was limited to 2 moving things on the screen at one time, and one of them had to be Pac-Man. So that left one more moving item for each of the 4 ghosts, because I guess it didn't seem to be a good idea to reduce the number of ghosts, because that would really be different than the arcade version. So what it did basically, it made it so only one of the ghosts could be on screen at a time, so it would rotate through the 4 ghosts. And this really added to that almost nauseating flicker effect. It's very difficult to record these Pac-Man games, and really it just looks so bad even to watch it. Another issue is the actual screen itself. Atari had a rule that they could only use black backgrounds for space games, because that was how they showed space. Remember, it's very simple back in those days. So what they did is they took Pac-Man and they gave it this ugly blue background, which just gave it a different feel, a different look, and it wasn't at all appealing. Now, the other thing that was really missing graphically was the fact that there were no fruit or other items like the key, like the Galaxian Man. It was just, there was one special item that appeared below the little house where the ghosts come out, and it was just a square with a little square in the middle, and it was called a vitamin. Just very bland, and like all these other things, just really took away from the experience of the game. The arcade version of Pac-Man was really well known for its different sounds. The sounds are very recognizable on their own, whether it's the sound of the munching of the pellets, or the gulping of eating a fruit, or even the sound of when the ghosts are running away from you and you're catching them. You hear that sound and you know it without even being able to see it. Well, the Atari 2600 just couldn't live up to that, to those type of expectations and that type of relation that everybody had with an arcade game that was so popular as it was at the time. Now, I'm going to be quite honest, the sounds in Atari, the Atari version of Pac-Man, really aren't all that bad. But the trouble is, they just don't live up to the expectations of a video game, arcade game as popular and as well known as the one that they're trying to recreate. Something that I wanted to bring up that sort of proves my point that the sound in Atari 2600 Pac-Man isn't all that bad is the fact that the sound of Pac-Man dying is actually very well done, and it's been used in a lot of movies over the years. Every once in a while you'll see some sort of clip of something dying and they'll play that sound of the Pac-Man dying, and it's going to be the one from the Atari 2600 version because it really is well known and it explains the effect. The Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man has 8 different game variations. Basically, these variations are all wrapped up in 2 different elements. The first one's the speed of the Pac-Man, and the second one is the speed of the Ghost. There's 2 different speeds for Pac-Man, and there's 4 different speeds for the Ghost. In a nutshell, Game 3 is the easiest one. It's the one specifically designed for children, where Pac-Man is the quickest, and the Ghosts are the slowest. And Game number 6 is actually the most difficult, with the fastest Ghosts and the slowest Pac-Man. Quite frankly, there's also another 8 versions because you can play any of those 8 versions with either 1 player or 2 player. Now, the scoring in the Atari version of Pac-Man is basically the same as in the arcade version, with the exception of one big thing: it's a 10th the score. By that I mean that a dot is worth 10 points in the arcade and 1 point on the Atari 2600. And same as a power pellet is worth 50 in the arcade, but only 5 here in the Atari 2600. The Ghost, same thing. After you've eaten a power pellet or a power pill, your first Ghost is 20, 40, 80, and 160. Times them by 10, and you get the values in the arcade. The only other thing that we have to think about now is the fruit that comes through, which vary in value. But in the Atari 2600 version, it's always the vitamin, and it's always worth 100 points. The other factor is how you earn extra men. With extra men in the arcade, it's every so many points. I think it's 10,000 points. Whereas in the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man, you gain an extra man every time you clear the screen. Alright guys, here it is. I never was very good at this. I haven't played it a whole lot. But Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Here we go. Alright, so we have the, let's see, the copyright notice, game 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see where the 2 players shows, how you get 2 players, 8 different ones. Here it is, game number 1. We'll just play this one, the regular game, and away we go. Alright, did you ever notice how the ghosts, they look kind of clear? Oh, 1, 2, 3. I can get all 4 of them here if I can do it right. Hey, there we go. 20, 40, 80, and 160 points. Just like that. You get 1 point for every wafer they eat, and you get 5 points for the pellets. And then I got a 2, 3, 4. Right on. I got them all again. There's a vitamin there, but I'm not going to get at it this time. Back up in the corner. 1, 2. I don't know if I've ever gotten all of them once, let alone 3 times in a row. Yes, sir. 20, 40. 80, 160. Pretty good. But what I started to say was, get in there. I tell you, I find it really difficult to hit as you're going straight down. Oh, shoot. There goes the first man. Still got 2 more men. Look down at the bottom corner, the dots. Down in the bottom left, that's my men. Oh, gee. I didn't quite get it. All right. Gotta get through the first screen here anyway. Let's see if we can get these guys again. Anyway, what I started to say for the 3rd time. 1, 2. See how they get more solid as they're on top of each other? 3, 4. The flicker's not as bad when they're on top of each other because it's going for a full frame rate. When they're all separated, there's a lot of flicker because there's actually only one of them being shown on the screen at any one time. All right, let's draw them away from those wafers so I can maybe go back in and finish up the screen. We'll drop down there, see what they do. Get in there. Okay, good. And yes, right on. Cleared the screen. That's pretty good for me. And I won another man. Now I got 2 again. Do the loop. They're flickering a lot now because they're all separated. Get in there. Okay. 1 man left. This one plus 1 more. Look, the vitamin's up. The vitamin stays up even when you die. So there we go. There's 100 points. Just like that. Ooh, that was lucky. Get in there. Okay. It was too late. If I had gone the first time, it would have been all right. All right. The last man. So let's just go for points. We'll go for the actual power pills and try to eat some ghosts. There's 1, 2, 3. And I got them. All 4 right there. Okay. I'll never get this screen cleared. So let's just do it again here if we can. 1, 2. They do chase you. All the ghosts act pretty much the same. There's no differences in these ones like there is in the arcade version. I got 3 of them. I only got 3 that time. That's all right. It's pretty good, actually. All right, let's get this upper corner. Trouble is here we go. Trouble, 2, 3, all right on top of each other. Perfect. I'm just going to clear these out of here because the trouble is when you eat up all your power pills, it's just hard to get around the maze and pick up all the other ones without having a minute for a break. So here we go. No, I get up there. Oh, it drives me crazy. Trying to get up. There we go. It's easy to make the turn when you run into a wall, but when you're going down something open, it's very hard to get turned around. Up we go. Oh, they're all down there. I'm going to go back down. Oh, I almost got hit. I got 1 wafer left. I'm going to get this cleared if I get that 1 wafer going across. Oh, the vitamin's there, but the vitamin stayed. Even though I cleared the screen, the vitamin stayed. Let's try to loop around and get it again. And yes, 100 points. All right, so 2,200 points is pretty good. I'll never get through this one. I got 1 man after this. Let's try to get some ghosts. There goes 1. Keep going. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to get 1 that time. But there. Now they switch back. Got me. Okay, last man. Might as well get the pills and try to get as many points as possible. 1, 2. Get up there. Oh, that's so frustrating. It's so slippery. There's no other way to put it than to call it slippery. It just won't go in those openings when you go, that's right there. Oh, same thing again. And that was my last man. Oh. Wow. Pac-Man, the Atari 2600. It certainly isn't the arcade game. The arcade game has such a fluid feel. It's got great sound. The sounds aren't too bad in this game. They really aren't. But It's just the fact that it's just not Pac-Man. It's just not the same as the other one. I don't know. I remember playing it back in the day, and yes, it is kind of fun. If you're picking it up all on its own, it's okay, but at the end of the day, man, it was just so disappointing. In early 1981, Todd Fry was challenged with producing a Pac-Man game for the Atari 2600, porting over the arcade console onto a 4K cartridge. He had to cut out a lot of the features in order to get it into the 4K cartridge. And rumor has it that he had an 8K cartridge version working, and it retained a lot of the same features of the arcade. It was a lot better game, but Atari, being the cost of those cartridges at the time, nixed that idea. It had to be on a 4K, so he had to take out a lot of the features. That, along with the fact that he felt that he had to have a 2-player version in this, also cut back on some of the things he could do with it. So even though it was cut back, this is the largest selling Atari 2600 cartridge there is. It sold over 7 million copies. That sounds absolutely incredible. It's the #1 seller by a long ways. But you know what?
What?
It sounds like it's a big success, but Atari, in all their wisdom, authorized the production of over 12 million of these cartridges. That was more Pac-Man cartridges than they had even sold Atari 2600s at the time. That was only about 10 million. But they figured that just by having Pac-Man on their system, they'd sell millions more systems. It just didn't work out that way. People bought this game, the 7 million, they brought them back in droves. They turned it on, they started playing it, and they all had the same reaction to it. What the hell is this? It's not the arcade version. It doesn't play like the arcade version. Yes, you're doing the exact same things, but it didn't have the sounds, the sights, the feels of the arcade. I can still remember myself anticipating this game. It was March 20th, 1982. It was Saturday morning. My friend Greg got a copy Friday night. He took it there. We had something going on that night, and then we were gonna get up in the morning and start playing this game. And there was 4 or 5 of us there at the time. We popped it open, put it in the Atari, turned it on, and all 4 or 5 of us just sat there in a bit of silence, like looking at it. We'd played Pac-Man like crazy in the bowling alley, at the mall, at the arcades. We loved Pac-Man. And we turned that on, we looked at it, and we all just do one thing. It wasn't Pac-Man. The feeling of disappointment can't be replicated today that we had when we first saw this game. Even though you may look at it and say it's not that bad of a game now, the disappointment that it caused in the gaming public just completely and utterly destroyed any credibility that the Atari 2600 had at the time. Well guys, taking all of this into consideration, and considering I could still feel the disappointment when I first saw this game wanting to play the arcade game at home, I have no other choice but to give Pac-Man for the Atari 2600 a crash causer rating. Well guys, that's it for my review of Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. Don't forget to hit like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. Take care guys, we'll see you next time.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't
Hey
grown
nerdlings,
up-
it's Tom and Laci from Do You Nerd.
And you're watching Papa Pete, the old guy gamer.
What the